We're excited to have the Josh Bersin Company back again to share their latest insights on the pharmaceutical industry from the Global Workforce Intelligence Project powered by Eightfold AI. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please put them in the chat located at the bottom of your console. And if you experience any technical difficulties, you can also place those in the chat and our team will help troubleshoot. With that, I'll pass it over to our speakers, Janet Mertens and Jordan Schmitting.
Thanks, Callie. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. I'm Janet Mertens, and I'm delighted to be here today and be joined by Jordan Schmitting, who is a member of the research team at the Josh Bersin Company. We are really excited to share with you some of our latest research findings and insights from the latest of our Global Workforce Intelligence Project industry studies. But before Jordan jumps in and shares some of the details, I'll just do a quick intro and kind of set the stage and share a little bit about what we're doing, as we dig into each of these industries and how we've, where we've come from and where we're at today in terms of the Global Workforce Intelligence Project. So again, Janet Mertens, I'm the SVP and Global Head of Research at the Josh Bersin Company. I have been in HR in some way, shape, or form for 20 plus years. I've been an HR practitioner, an HR leader, a consultant, and a researcher for the better part of the last decade. I've been leading research into all things HR and talent and future of work and people. I want to just start by kind of setting the stage in terms of what's going on in the landscape right now and why we're really digging into industries like pharma for to glean insights. Probably 2 years ago now, Jordan, I think it was 2 years ago. It's wild to think about it, but we really, we've been studying functional areas of HR and the talent domain for years with Josh and the team. And we were, with Eightfold, talking about this massive skills shortage. And so there's a few things that are kind of happening in the landscape, the environment that we're in, that have really caused some pressures on organizations. So we talk about the post-industrial era and the way that we are observing the trends that are occurring in business. There's sort of three things happening at the same time that are really disrupting business and requiring organizations to rethink how they are going to move forward. So one of the forces at play here is the just incredible industry convergence that's going on in the market right now. Industries are really shifting. So from a time of very clear boundaries between industries, what we're really starting to see is that every industry is now kind of creeping into or shifting into other industries. You think about Amazon becoming a healthcare organization or a business, or Walmart becoming a financial services company. And this is causing some talent implications for organizations, especially as they think about hiring and competing with new competitors and competing for consumers with new businesses. So that's one piece of the puzzle. Jordan, you're going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of the pharma industry itself. And I know there's some great examples there. Another piece of the puzzle that we are observing is the massive explosion of technology. And certainly over the past 10, 12 years, as we've moved from kind of digital transformation right through to mobile technologies, and now, of course, AI and ChatGPT, everything that we do around how we consume, how we live, how we shop, how we work is now being touched by and impacted by exponentially increasing technology. And so businesses are really having to figure out how the tech that's available now, and certainly AI, is going to impact both product design, customer relationships, but also how it affects the workforce itself. And then in the third piece that we talk about, at length with organizations is the reality of talent scarcity. falling birth rates, the great attrition, migration, resignation through the past few years, the shift, really, the seismic shift that's happened in the past couple of years in terms of how employees rather are interacting with their employers has really changed, and we are now facing a very disruptive talent scarcity and skills shortage around the globe, and that is, we predict that that's going to continue for some time. So with all of those kind of things happening at once, we wanted to dig into what are organizations thinking about in terms of how are they finding the right talent, finding the right skills, understanding what the skills of the future are, how they need to prepare. And so we started digging into the Eightfold data. And I'm just going to move forward a slide here and talk a little bit about this global workforce intelligence project. And I know there's tons of text on there, but really what we wanted to do is understand what are the talent trends and skill trends and what's happening to the jobs in individual industries that both the industry itself can learn from, but what is also, what can other industries learn from what's going on in perhaps adjacent industries or sectors or verticals. And so we started 2 years ago with maybe a very simple industry, the healthcare industry. And I joke when I say simple, we really, recognizing the massive talent shortages in healthcare, we wanted to understand what are leading companies doing to thrive when there is an incredibly high shortage of nurses and clinical staff. And as we dug in, we looked at, what are the skills needed in healthcare going forward? What are organizations doing to reorganize? And what are the roles that are most challenging to fill? We started to notice some patterns. And so as we continued our research, we then looked into the banking industry, the financial sector, consumer banking. And then we looked at consumer packaged goods to kind of get a sense of, hey, wait a second, are there organizations that are getting this right? Are there organizations that are leading the way and finding ways to access the intelligence that's out there, talent intelligence around the skills in the market, to really figure out how to not just recruit the right talent into the organization, but also to retain that talent, to redesign work so that the talent so that talent can actually innovate in the organization, and to reskill, right, to get the workforce ready for the future. And so out of that work came I'll go back here, came out a set of what we call pace setter organizations. And so as we looked at the data, and we looked at data from Eightfold, so the millions of data points from the Eightfold talent intelligence platform that tells us about skills and adjacent skills and role trends and shifting jobs. And so we looked at all of that data. We looked at, we talked with dozens of CHROs and HR team leaders and HR teams, and we really have been just having this conversation for 2 years. And what emerged from our research has been this group of pace-setting organizations. These are leading organizations that are financial outperformers. They are leaders in their industry, they are leading in market innovation. They are, great places to work. They have incredible employer brand and high retention. And they are also leading in emerging HR practices that we have identified over the past few years at the JBC to be high impact practices, around retention, recruiting, reskilling, and redesign. And so we have this almost a leader group or set of pace setter companies that have actually been able to show us some of those really key characteristics around how to thrive in this new post-industrial era. So all of that to say, we've got just a ton of great research and findings. Some of the things that we unlock in the research, and Jordan's going to dig in on the pharmaceutical sector to share what we found. But some of the things that we're unleashing, and this is an example from banking, I'll save Jordan, I won't spoil the pharma story for you, but we're really able to look at what is setting apart the pace setter organization. So these outperformers, how are they thinking differently about talent? And the example that I'll give from banking or even from healthcare is that their composition of the workforce is materially different than their peers, than their lagging peers. They are thinking about skills differently. They are looking at transformation as a capability and baking it into their DNA. So there's a number of kind of shifts that they are making. And so in the pharmaceutical industry, we did the same kind of analysis, and we have uncovered a number of really incredible insights about what pharmaceutical leaders are, how they're thinking differently, given the disruptions and the convergence that's happening and the shifts that's happening inside the industry. And so with that, without further ado, I want to turn it over to Jordan Schmitting. Jordan led our research and is our pharma expert here at the JBC. Jordan, why don't you do an introduction and then jump in and share some of the incredible findings from our research into the pharmaceutical sector.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much, Janet. Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan, and I'm a senior research analyst at the Josh Bersin Company. I have experience as an HR practitioner in a variety of different industries like commercial real estate, higher education, transportation, retail. But prior to my HR career, I intentionally chose a academic path that involved neuroscience. So I majored in neuroscience to get an understanding of how behavioral sciences can influence the workplace. And during that time, I had the opportunity to work in a neuropharmacology lab, and I had the opportunity to participate as part of the research team in this pharmacology lab. So when I had the opportunity, when I came here at the Josh Bersin Company to study the pharmaceutical industry, I was very excited to dive into this industry that I had once known as a researcher and now can look at from an industry analyst perspective. So with that, I would love to kick us off with an expansion of the conversation Janet had about industry convergence. So as you can see, all the industries that we're studying right now are being reinvented through this idea of industry convergence. So for example, you have healthcare, which is featured in green here today, and it has growing applications in retail. The auto industry is influencing the future of how products from retail and consumer packaged goods are manufactured and received. And likewise, the pharma industry is not immune to industry convergence. So blockchain, for example, originated in the cryptocurrency industry as a system of ledger, and it's now being used for a variety of different use cases in pharma. So it's being used to trace the origin of pharmaceuticals, the transport of drugs, the procurement of raw materials, and to even validate return drugs. So the entire supply chain process. But beyond supply chain applications, some pharmaceutical companies are starting to use blockchain to efficiently keep track of samples throughout the research process, which is very exciting. And we're also seeing pharma companies expand their product pipelines with digital therapies. So this is a little bit of infiltration from the healthcare industry. And these digital therapies are things like computer games that are used to treat lazy eye. So they're not just thinking about molecules and biologics, they're thinking about how can we expand our product pipeline into the digital space and essentially, in some respect, become a technology company. We also have another major healthcare influence, and there's many more, but I want to call out the use of medical device wearables in clinical trials. By infiltrating medical devices that were invented for healthcare purposes into the pharmaceutical industry, all of a sudden we can collect patient data for the purpose of clinical trials without those patients having to leave their homes every time data needs to be collected. We can also collect data at more frequent intervals through these wearable medical devices. And so it's really been changing the game and how mass amounts of data for clinical trials can be gathered. Within the pharmaceutical industry itself, we also have biotechnology, and this is shifting the pharma landscapes because bioproducts and biosimilars, as well as things like cell and gene therapies, are gaining prevalence rapidly. And this is actually a perfect segue into our discussion on the trends. Let me just change the slide. There we go. On the trends that are disrupting the status quo within the pharma industry and calling for innovation. So it's already complicated enough for pharma companies to create treatments that improve patient health while meeting regulatory requirements across the globe and while balancing profit with both accessibility and affordability. That's almost a business impossible task right there. But on top of that, today, pharma companies are also navigating geopolitical, economic, and regulatory factors that are disrupting supply chains. And while the industry was once an example of effective globalized supply chains with backup plans in case the supply ran out in one area, since the onset of the pandemic, many pharma companies are actually opting to regionalize some of their operations to protect themselves from the global factors of instability that we've experienced in the past few years. So that's the first trend. A second major trend we're seeing is that digitization is rewiring how work gets done. It's creating efficiencies that enable speed, scalability, and cost savings without sacrificing quality. And even in some cases, it's improving quality. So in order to be among the first to market with any product, pharma companies are digitizing their research methods, their clinical trial processes, and their manufacturing to stay ahead of their competition. We also know that biotechnology, as I previously discussed, is disrupting the industry with the possibilities that it creates. So I actually have another slide to dive into this one a little bit further. So what we have been seeing is that generic profit margins are declining. And at the same time, emerging biopharma companies, so these are companies that are leveraging biotechnology, but they either spend less than $200 million on R&D annually or make less than $500 million in global revenue annually. So these are smaller biopharma organizations. They are responsible for 53% of new drugs back in 2021 and 73% of new launches. So new launches are just really a modification to an existing treatment, but whether you're looking at those modifications or those entirely new drugs, emerging biopharma companies are dominating the industry. Back in 2018, these organizations owned 73% of late-stage research activity, while the larger pharma organizations were accountable for only 19%. And then also, we are seeing the penetration of new research modalities such as cell and gene therapy, mRNA vaccines, mRNA platforms. This is increasing, and from 2020 to 2022, the prevalence of these things increased from 11% to 21%, and that's only going up. So biotechnology is infiltrating the pharma product landscape. I also want to discuss this final trend, which is that cost savings is out and value creation is in. So this is a mindset shift in the pharmaceutical industry because traditionally, large pharmaceutical organizations have focused on cost savings, but now the mindset is shifting to value creation. So traditionally, pharma companies leverage their scale to create opportunities to cut costs. But now with these emerging biopharma organizations, which are smaller, and in general, they're responding more agilely to advancements in science and technology, scale is no longer protection for these pharma companies. We also have external factors like inflation, emerging government policies that are becoming more strict, biosimilars threatening profit margins, as I discussed. So with all of these factors, it's nearly impossible to continue with a cost savings mindset. And instead, organizations that are maintaining market relevancy are focusing on value creation. So some examples, some organizations are investing up to 70% of their operating expenses into R&D, while also pioneering new ways of increasing throughput in their instruments and streamlining processes in general. Others are pursuing new areas of research entirely to expand their pipeline potential. And one biotech organization we spoke with has already invested over $100 million into creating a digital-first enterprise. And they expect to spend even more than $100 million, again, by 2025, to further accelerate their ability to design new drugs. So these organizations are focusing on what investments can we make, where can we spend money to increase our ability to generate value. So with that, I want to talk about the future headlines of the pharma industry. So we know that the pharma companies in general are going to need to speed up their transformation to meet changing market dynamics. All the trends I just talked about, they're changing the market drastically, and pharma companies need to be able to keep up. We also see that biotechnology and digitization are driving industry reinvention. Emerging biopharma companies are gaining market share. And ultimately what this means, and this is what we're going to talk more about today, is that product and process innovation are imperative. AI-enabled digital skills are going to be needed across the value chain, not just in R&D. And organizations are going to need to think about shifting up what their talent mix looks like. So that was a high-level overview of what's happening in the industry right now. And I want to start diving into these key findings that we feature in our research. And I'll dive into each of these in more detail a little bit later on. But to highlight them now, the first one is that pharma companies need to speed up transformation to meet changing industry dynamics and secure their market relevancy. The pace setter companies that we identified, and these are the pace setters that Janet talked about that we look at in all of the industries we study, the pace setters in pharma are highly invested in skills that drive product and process innovation. We also looked at emerging HR practices, which we call systemic HR solutions. And there are certain systemic HR solutions that can prime pharma companies to unlock radical innovation. And finally, we looked at how talent intelligence generates effective decision-making for building a sustainable pharma workforce, for future-proofing the workforce, and making sure that organizations are positioned to maintain their market relevancy or grow it. So to dive a little bit deeper into the first one, which is needing to speed up transformation, this is something that's well known. Because as you can see on the left side, if you're not the fifth to market with a product or a treatment, you're probably going to get 2% of the market share or less. So the time, not just the product innovation, but your process for getting those innovative products to market has to be top notch in order to secure that market share. And as you can see on the right, it can take up to 15 years from the drug development through the clinical trial process through approval to bring a product to market. Some are faster. A lot of biotechnology products are faster, but there are still products out there that it can take up to 15 years to reach market. So if your organization is behind in a certain research area, it could take years to catch up. So what organizations are doing is trying to invest in process innovation so that they can get their products that they innovated out the door faster. So this is why they need to speed up transformation to be able to agilely respond to the market dynamics. We know from our research, there we go, that most pharma companies are not ready to drive the necessary product and process innovation that they need. So when we analyzed the roles and the skills that are prevalent in the industry, we discovered that most of the top penetrated roles are either stable or rising, but the top penetrated skills being used in those roles today are either stable or declining. So there's this mismatch between we need these roles, but the skills in these roles as they exist today are becoming outdated. So we need to update the skills that are being utilized in these roles. And also automation has been a driving force on the fastest declining skills. And this makes sense if we look at the pharma talent readiness of these four big digital trends: big data and AI, automation, digital supply chain, agility. Automation is the one that pharma companies are the most mature in. They have automated manufacturing. They've automated perhaps a few research processes. So automation has already led to a decline in the top penetrated skills. And the new skills that are up and coming are going to be in these areas of big data and AI, digital supply chain, and agility, as well as digital skills in other areas of the business, not just supply chain. So with that, I want to start talking about what pace setters are doing to set themselves apart, to position themselves for success. So we discovered that pace setter pharma companies have 1.5 times more people, so about 50% more people in R&D roles relative to company size. And simultaneously, they are operating leaner in the critical talent populations of their business. So in all of the other core areas of their business, they're operating leaner and they're investing heavily in R&D. This is not just about saying, oh, we want to expand our R&D department and we want to fire people in these other areas. That's not what's happening here at all. Pharma companies are upskilling their workforce in ways that prioritizes their product innovation. And they're able to operate leaner in these other areas because they've also invested in process innovation. So the process innovation investments is allowing them to be leaner everywhere else so that they can prioritize their product innovation and R&D. But beyond their talent mix difference, they also have a different mix of skills. So our pacesetter companies have 1.6 times more people with product innovation capabilities. So the capability to develop drugs and to engage in drug discovery, about 1.6 more people with that. When we look at then the skill mix of the researchers, we can see that they are prioritizing biotechnology skills more than other companies. They are embracing these emerging areas of research. And beyond research specialties, they are also investing in digitally rewired skills that are innovating the research process itself. So this theme of product and process innovation is coming through in their skill mix as well. They have the product innovation with their biotechnology skills, their drug development, their drug discovery capabilities, but they're also simultaneously investing in enabling the research process. So they are looking at ways where they can connect data sets, where they can streamline laboratory techniques in order to enable their researchers to conduct their research faster. We also noticed that our pace setters had 2.5 times more people with AI-enabled digital skills that apply across the value chain. So outside of R&D, they are also investing in AI-enabled digital skills to a greater amount. And these are things like as simple as expense management, for example. They are looking at how they can digitalize their entire enterprise in order to prioritize the value-creating aspects of their business. Okay. So that's a little bit about what our pace setters are doing at a high level, but we need to talk about how they are doing those things. So at the Josh Bersin Company, we talk about HR as a systemic function. So it's not enough to think about, okay, how are we going to upskill our employees? Or how are we going to bring in the talent that we don't currently have so that we have the same amount of biotechnology skills as pace setters? That's not the correct mentality to approach this. Pacesetter companies look at HR from a systemic perspective. So they think about how their reskilling strategies fits in with their retaining strategies and the redesign and their recruit strategies. So when it comes to some of the things that they're, so when it comes to like what pacesetters are doing is they are leveraging the full systemic HR model. But for a second, I want to go back and I want to talk about what the pharma industry is good at as a whole. So this graph right here is looking at what the pharma industry has, the maturity of the pharma industry across those 4 R's compared to all industries combined. So if we look at recruitment, reskilling, redesign, the pharma industry is about average. But when we look at retain, the pharma industry is above average significantly. And this makes sense for a lot of reasons, but 2 reasons in particular. So we know that their product innovation workforce, their R&D workforce is highly educated, and it can take years to develop the subject matter expertise to innovate within a specific research area, even after they finish their education. So there are many barriers of entry to achieving the credentials and the expertise that researchers have in the pharma industry. And because of that, the available workforce that can go into these roles is smaller. So it makes sense that pharma companies traditionally have had to focus on retention. Also, it's not just about the R&D workforce, it's also about the manufacturing and the supply chain workforce in pharma. And traditionally, manufacturing and supply chain has just been incredibly critical because pharma companies often scale their medications globally. The skills in the supply chain manufacturing talent segments are often transferable between industries. So historically, it's been incredibly important for pharma companies to retain their employees for a variety of different reasons. So it makes sense that over time they become good at this. Pharma companies often have very strong EVPs, for example. But what the pace setters are doing differently is that they are not only leaning into their retained strengths, but they have developed their reskilling, redesign, and recruitment strengths as well to create systemic strategies. So let's talk a little bit about that. Here we go. So when the pace setters look at systemic HR, they are focused on enabling innovation across their value chain. So some of the things they're doing from a recruitment perspective, for example, is unlocking innovation at all levels of their business. And one company in particular developed a niche research area team. So they wanted to explore a very niche research area for the first time. And they were looking at bringing individuals from the company in, but also at hiring externally. But they realized that they had trouble filling the positions, and the time to fill was concerningly long. And so what they did is they invested in a talent intelligence platform, piloted it with this niche team, and then became able to define their positions by a specific combinations of skills. All of a sudden, when they broke down these roles in this new area by skills, recruiters were armed with insights that allowed them to match candidates, both internal and external, to the specific skills that were needed in the role. And then as a result, this organization reduced their time to fill. The recruiters had a smoother experience because they felt like they were equipped to hire what the company truly needed. They felt like they had that clarity. And so this organization has now expanded these efforts, not only just these niche teams, but across their organization. Other pharma companies, and from a recruitment perspective, are turning to 2 core skills that they identify as key indicators of a candidate's long-term success. So they are recruiting for the ability to adapt and the determination to grow. So they're almost hiring for this growth mindset to fit in with this narrative that the pharmaceutical industry is heavily reliant on innovation, and the idea of keeping up with digital skills is going to be an ongoing process. How work gets done, the products that are developed, it's going to be constantly evolving. So pharmaceutical companies are trying to establish a workforce that's ready and excited for the ability to grow. From a retention perspective, pace-setting pharma organizations are prioritizing human-centered leadership, and they're leveraging inclusivity to spark employee creativity and foster innovation. And as a result, they've actually seen a reduction in turnover. Employee listening is also a critical retention lever that pharma companies are leaning into. In fact, one of the largest players in the pharmaceutical industry realized that, in general, data wasn't the rare commodity. Data on the employee experience wasn't the rare commodity, but the attention to the data was the rare commodity. So what they did is they established a system of continuous employee listening to gather feedback continuously, but they also positioned their managers to not leverage that data as simply a report card that they look at every few months, but as a tool to drive proactive action that improves the employee experience. So they not only established a way of continuously listening to employees, but they worked with their managers, established that mindset that this feedback is a tool and not a report card that measures their success. And as a result, the managers are creating a more positive employee experience for their employees. There's also this really fascinating story about a small biopharma organization that has a global innovation tournament. And in this tournament, every employee in their organization is invited to develop ideas inspired by either game-changing science that has emerged or business challenges. And then the employees work in teams, and they ultimately contribute to the direction of the company. So some of the things that have been invented through this method include, a new research program in a disease area. Employees also advocated for a 3D printing lab. So the employees were advocating for the specific digital technology to help them in their work. They also ended up establishing a lifelong learning platform, which helped with an upskilling initiative. So these systemic HR practices, while they might fall into one bucket, they really impact each other. Reskilling, from a reskilling perspective, capability academies are a rising trend in the pharmaceutical industry. And these capability academies are different from an upskilling program because they are really designed to reach a broad audience. So some companies, for example, are implementing an AI capability academy for every single one of their employees because they recognize that AI is not just important for their IT team. It's not just important for their researchers to understand that if they happen to be using AI to accelerate the research, it's important for every single employee to be upskilled in this, because as process innovations roll in, employees across the value chain are going to need to learn how to leverage these digital technologies. From a reskilling perspective, Pacesetters are also relying on gig and talent marketplaces. So as a whole, the pharmaceutical industry can be relatively immature when it comes to having effective talent marketplaces, but our Pacesetters are leading the way in establishing these and expanding these within their organization to facilitate movement of employees, not just between roles, but also between gigs and projects. This is one of the ways where they are matching employee interests with very new research areas. If a company just wants to put a little bit of investment in a research area, for example, so they can do a gig marketplace. But companies that are also leveraging a talent marketplace are focused not just on lateral movements and traditional promotions, but also not just vertical movements, but also lateral movements is what I meant to say there. Lateral movements between functions, even between different research teams, to promote cross functionality, to promote innovative thinking. So they are really embracing a flexible model of employee movement. From a redesign perspective, this is where, in my opinion, things are very exciting in terms of the innovation that's going on. So we talked to one company in particular that's really leading the way in redesigning how work is done in a pharmaceutical company. And they simply said, you know what, our internal engineers, they have expertise in problem solving and creating efficiencies. Let's connect them with our research team. And there wasn't a specific directive for where productivity should arise from this partnership of engineers and the research team. Instead, the organization said, okay, our scientists, our researchers, whenever you think to yourself, there must be a better way to do this, we want you to connect with our engineers, and our engineers already are aware of this. They are going to work with you, and together through collaboration, the research team and the engineers identified problems and then created a lot of solutions. So some of those include internally innovating high throughput instruments, so in-house creating new instruments to conduct research, embedding AI in certain electronics to reduce data subjectivity. They created a software that automates the process of taking measurements within human cells. And they also integrated several digital tools within research instruments to cut workflows from not only weeks to days, but in some cases, weeks to hours. So really, they are unlocking the employee voice, which sounds like a retention strategy, but they're doing that to enable redesign. They're connecting employees from different areas of the business to work together to figure out how can we enable this process innovation. So that is a high-level summary of a lot of the main practices from a reskilling, redesign, retain, and recruitment perspective that Pacesetters are adopting. But I also want to spend a little bit of time today talking about talent intelligence. I talked about this a little bit, but really what these Pacesetters are doing is they are not just thinking about what systemic HR practices we have to do. They're thinking about how do they digitalize these systemic HR practices? How do we enable recruiters with the insights that they need? How do we enable people managers to craft roles and define them based on skills? And what that means is it's looking at the roles and the skills in the organizations and identifying solutions. And this is something that we explore heavily in our report. But for now, I just want to dive a little bit deeper into how pace-setting pharma organizations are operationalizing talent intelligence. And it really starts with step one, which is building a cross-functional talent intelligence center of excellence. I will say that based on our analysis, a good chunk of the pharmaceutical industry are really in steps 1 and 2 here. The ones that are looking at talent intelligence, they are in the early days of that. So pace-setting companies are saying, okay, we're going to dedicate some team members to being a center of excellence for talent intelligence. Then the organizations will identify their critical talent challenges. In the pharmaceutical industry, it's very easy to say, oh, we have a critical challenge here, here, and here. But these companies are saying these are our actual priorities that are most critical to enabling us to create product or process innovation. And we are going to prioritize this. And from there, they start to analyze the roles and skills and organizational trends. and layer in for our solutions to ultimately intelligently create a systemic HR strategy for their most critical talent challenges. So when it comes to unlocking this in your organization, it's not just about HR leading the way here. It's about fostering C-suite collaboration. And there are many key players here, but the CEO needs to be responsible for driving innovation transformation. The CHRO is there to say, okay, these are the systemic people practices that we need to implement to enable our workforce to do their work efficiently, to operate at the top of their credentials, to really work together to, in some cases, collaborate to enable this product and process innovation. The CIO is going to be focused on technology enablement. The COO is focused on operational enablement. And the COO here might be the sponsor for the specialization of research. So they might say, okay, expanding our product pipeline is a priority for us. And one of the ways we want to do that is expanding research specialization. So the operational excellence is about process improvement, but it can also be about that. How do we position ourselves for product innovation as well? And then the CFO, of course, is going to be focused on cost and investment. And the CFO here needs to prioritize company spend on digital transformation, as well as unlocking that innovation. So if you enable the C-suite collaboration, the business is on the same page. Ultimately, what you're going to be able to do is solve the critical skills gap of the pharma industry, which is an innovation skills gap. This is specifically a high skills velocity problem where we know that the skills that are needed in the pharmaceutical industry are mismatched with the roles right now. That's a problem that's happening. And that problem is not going to go away if we're not constantly upskilling our workforce, looking at these systemic HR strategies to adopt systemic practices. So it involves changing the talent mix as the slide says, and that happens at a role level, it happens at a skills level, and it ultimately happens when the whole organization is on the same page for their strategy to unlock that product and process innovation. But with that, we have some time left over, and I think we can kick off our Q&A.
Yeah, Jordan, well, thank you for this. I mean, there's so much rich insight here. And I think, as I was listening, and of course, I know this story well, but as I was listening to you share, and I'm going to kick us off with an initial question, but, I think some of the stories around how, and I love the how pacesetter companies are putting those 4R strategies or that systemic approach in place to really solve for this innovation skills gap. So thank you for sharing that. My question to kick us off, because we do have some time for questions. So if the audience has any questions, you can put it in the Q&A or the chat on the platform here. But let's start with a question I always like to think about as a researcher, but also like to ask the team. And that is, what was the most surprising finding for you? What did you find to just be sort of an aha as you were digging into the roles and skills data and talking to organizations? What stood out to you as the most surprising finding of this research?
For me, the most surprising finding was that our pacesetter companies are operating leaner in every area of their business other than R&D. An initial hypothesis is that they might have been prioritizing R&D talent and maybe their digital talent, but that's not what we found. Their digital talent, their supply chain talent, all of their talent outside of R&D, they were operating leaner in those talent group areas than the other companies. And so as I started to ask, why is that? Why are they able to operate leaner compared to other companies? The story of the innovation skills gap really shone through because our pacesetters are not just focused on the product innovation, because yes, they're prioritizing biotechnology and emerging skill areas, but they are also focused on those skills that are driving process innovation. And what that has resulted in is their ability to operate leaner across their business and then choose R&D as their investment, the area that they want to invest in of that product innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's sort of a knock-on effect, right? So focus on innovation and product for sure, streamline and optimize in the business for all of the other components of the business, and then be able to leverage some of that efficiency and investment right back into R&D. It's a bit of a circular, a virtuous circle. I love that. Another question for you, while we, while the audience kind of reflects on on some of the findings you shared, let's talk a little bit about those biotech skills. So pace setters, you mentioned, have a higher penetration of biotechnology skills. Are those the only skills? Are there other differentiating factors in the skill set, the research skill set? I know we've talked about, hyper specialization in pace setters. Tell us a little bit about that.
I would love to talk about that. So one of the most interesting findings from the research skill mix that I found is that our non-pace setters, so the average organization in the industry, is focused a lot more heavily on laboratory techniques. Their skill mix is focused on those laboratory techniques, about 30% more than our pace setters. But conversely, our pace setters had about 30% more focus on hyper segmentation, so research expertise in hyper specialized areas of research. So our pace setters are thinking more strategically about the skills that they want to bring in and develop within the organization, and they have effectively focused on developing that expertise, whereas our non-pace setters are saying, okay, it's really important that all of these researchers have these laboratory techniques, and they define their roles based on these laboratory technique skills versus thinking more strategically about defining roles more on expertise, which then helps the pace setter organizations know the percentage of the workforce they have dedicated to different research expertise areas, but also know where their gaps are. And know they have more information to enact those systemic HR strategies because they have an easier time identifying their skills gaps.
Yeah, that visibility. Yeah, no, I love that. When I think back on some of the other industries that we've looked at, Jordan, and you know this well, as we've dug into, for example, consumer banking, one of the things that we've really noted is the importance of, and it continues to emerge across every industry, the importance of thinking about the 4 R's in relationship to each other. It really is an organic system, operating system, not just individual levers. And I'm thinking about banking, and there's a great example from our research around consumer banks and how they are really, focused heavily on bringing in and recruiting next-gen digital talent to support their talent or their tech transformation and their digital transformation. But by almost, for some of the companies that aren't our pace setters, they are actually recognizing that they are losing that next-gen tech talent within, I think within a 5-year period. The huge numbers of tech talent that came into consumer banking actually left and went back to tech or other industries. So it's sort of an open drain, and it really kind of brought to life the need for organizations to think about not just recruiting as a siloed solution or not just reskilling, but what does work redesign look like? What happens when you recruit and you don't give that workforce really, in the case of the tech talent in consumer banking, if you're not giving that talent really interesting projects to keep them and to engage them in the workforce. Why in pharma? What's happening in pharma when it comes to those pace setters really thinking about all 4 R's? And you gave some great examples. Anything to add around keeping in mind the relationship between the 4 R's for pharma companies?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is that the pharmaceutical industry is somewhat already primed compared to other industries to think about systemic HR as a systemic system, because a lot of biopharma and pharma company employees are already thinking about the body systemically. The researchers have a familiarity with biology, and systemic HR is really following that same model. All of our systems, our nervous system, our endocrine system, and our bodies, they work together. And with systemic HR, these 4 R's are systems that come together to form one body, one being. So the mentality there, I think the pharmaceutical industry is already primed for. When it comes to actually leveraging all 4 of the R's, I think the example that I shared where our pay setters are pioneering continuous employee listening, leaning into employee listening, which is not only a way to retain employees to make them feel heard, but then they're leveraging that to say, okay, these are some of the ways where we can actually improve our processes. We can actually redesign the work here or restructure teams here based on the feedback. And also the feedback might illuminate opportunities to hire more people, to reduce workloads, to create a better employee experience. And so all of these systemic HR opportunities, even though I talked about them in isolation within the 4 buckets, they do connect with each other to create really an irresistible experience for employees.
No, that's fantastic, and I think, I think that is the lesson that that organizations can learn from the pace setters and from all of our research around that real systemic approach, and how each lever kind of has an impact on other parts of the talent challenge. One more question for you, Jordan, and then I think we will wrap up unless there are other questions from the audience. So before we get to kind of closing words, any additional examples that you want to share with this group, specifically around the redesign component of the 4R model? I mean, I love that conversation or that example you gave about engineers kind of working side by side in the labs in that organization. Any other standout examples where in pharma pace setter companies, redesign is really happening in real time?
I think one of the most unique examples that I saw in the pharmaceutical industry is where large pharma companies are partnering with small emerging biopharma organizations, and they are essentially giving them the resources of a large pharmaceutical firm, and in return they get some of the profits when the products that are developed hit the market. And so this is a way for pharmaceutical companies to help invest in innovative research areas to get some of the benefits of that without creating an entire new segment of their R&D function. So in a way, it's a way to get their feet wet, to explore these research areas, partner with these experts that already exist in these smaller companies, and then perhaps acquire these companies someday when there's already a relationship between them. So that was a really interesting redesign element where they are not necessarily redesigning how the work gets done, which they are doing, but this specific example of redesign is about redesigning the function, expanding the areas they are involved in, but it's not entirely
really
doing
kind
that
of a shift, right? It's a mindset shift of moving from kind of core jobs to the work itself and the teams that do that work. I think we've got a couple of questions in the chat, so let me just take a look here. So we've got a question here around, curious about your finding with companies who've been working with agility. Agility. We found some benefits, but also some serious challenges and misunderstandings that complicate how we work together. Any words on, making agility work in the pharma sector?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that I could say there. And I think what it boils down to is perhaps employee listening. So in terms of being agile and how research gets done in that organization where the engineers partnered with the researchers, they unlock the employee voice. They let the researchers say, like, wait, these are some of the ways that we can shift and change what we do. So the company was at that stage less focused on the leaders self-identifying what the problems are, where we need to be more agile. And they were really unlocking the employee voice and let the employees tell them, because the employees are the ones that are most familiar with the work. So they're almost like decentralizing the process of figuring out where to be more agile. And I would love to provide a more detailed answer if we have a little bit more context, but I think unlocking the employee voice is a key strategy there.
I love that, and I think we can do some follow-on too if there's some other examples you want to give. I want to give time for one more question before we wrap. I know we could talk about this for hours, and I love this question too. The question is, what is the relative age of the pace setter companies in the pharma research? The question the attendee asked, they often find more established companies are less able to change quickly and to adapt. So are the pace setter companies all very new, very nascent companies, or do we have a mix in there? So, and I know you've got more details here.
Absolutely. The short answer is that our pace setter mix is a mix. We do have some established organizations, but we also have some young biopharma, biotechnology companies in there too. So to your comment about often well-established companies are less able to change quickly, that is a general trend that we saw, but some large companies have achieved that. But our pace setters do include some of those smaller companies as well.
I think that's important, Jordan, because it does mean that it's not impossible. As an established sort of incumbent, it's not impossible to change. We are seeing pace setters crop up there across industries, actually, not just in pharma, but our pace setter analysis in some of our other industries have also shown or revealed some, some large, long-standing companies. So it is possible to make that shift. Listen, I know we are almost at the top of the hour, and this has been a fantastic conversation. Jordan, thank you for taking us through all of the research and the findings. I know we just scratched the surface. The recording, I think, Callie, you're going to come back on and talk a little bit about how folks can get the recording, which will be great. But other than that, thank you so much, Jordan, for being here with me today and sharing this great research.
It was my pleasure.
Callie, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And thank you, Janet and Jordan, for a great presentation. If you missed part of today's webinar or want to share with a colleague, the on-demand recording will be available through the link you used to log in today. And we will also have the on-demand recording available on Eightfold's website. Thanks again and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.